Hello and welcome back. In the last video, we bound the text on our widget to a variable on our item. So now when we hover over the weapon, we get the name that is assigned to that weapon. So we can go ahead and click on one of the weapons, and in the details panel, if we search for name, then we get item name, and we can change this to anything we'd like, such as machine gun, and the widget will reflect that change. Now you might notice my font looks a little different. I found a new font that I liked a little better. It's called Bellin, and it's here on 1001freefonts.com. So I went ahead and changed it to that, and I imported those fonts into my assets/fonts folder, and then I came back into my widget and I simply changed the font to this Bellin natural font. I gave it a letter spacing of 50, and I gave it an outline with a size of 1, so now the letters have a black outline. So I think that looks a little bit better, but really this is developer preference at this point, so I'm just letting you know that I changed that font in case you're wondering why it looks different. Now in this video, we are going to bind this ammo amount here. Now any given item, such as a weapon or maybe ammo that you can pick up, is going to have an amount. And so this amount here, item amount, needs to change depending on that variable on the weapon. So the first thing we can do is add a variable to our item class. So we're going to do that first. Before we do that, I think this number looks a little small, so I'm going to change its font size from 14 to say maybe 16. I think that looks better. And let's change the text to say 129. That way we can see what it looks like with 3 digits. Maybe we can give it a font size of say 18. I think that looks even better. Okay, so we're ready to add a variable to the item class for this count. So let's do that. So here we are in Visual Studio, and I'm going to open item.h and scroll down to the private section. Now here we have the F string called item name that we just added in the last video. So we need an integer to hold the count for this item. So we're going to use an int32, and let's call this item count. Now I'd like to be able to edit this from blueprints as well as in the details panel for an instance in the world. So let's give this a U property, and we'll make this edit anywhere. And I'll also make it blueprint read write in case we want to edit it from blueprints. And I'll give it the same category and meta specifier as our other variables. And I'll go ahead and give this a comment as well, and we'll say item count and in parentheses ammo, etc. Okay, and we can also give this a default value in the constructor. So up here in aItems constructor, in the member initializer list at the top, let's go ahead and give this a default value of 0, and we can compile this. Okay, so we're back here in the editor, and we're going to open up pickup widget. So in underscore game and HUD, we'll open pickup widget BP, and let's select the number here, item amount, which we have hard coded to 129. We're now going to bind this. So click bind and create binding, and we'll get a bind function here. Now we've already added a variable called item reference, and that variable gets set in begin play for base weapon BP, if you'll recall from the previous video. But we're still going to get that and check it with an isValid node, because we don't want to try to access it if it's not valid. That's like trying to get a null pointer and accessing it, dereferencing it. If it is valid, we can drag off of item reference and type item count, and we can get item count. That's that integer we just created. Now, if we drag item count directly into return value, we'll get a toText node. This converts from an integer into a text value, so that's pretty handy. And now all we need is to hook up the isValid straight to the return node, like that. So now we can compile and save this. And if we go back into our weapons and base weapon folder, double click on that, we can give our base weapon a default value for item count, say 100. We can compile and save that. Now in the world, we have two of these. We can select one of them and change item count from 100 to, say, 45. So we should expect one of these to say 45 and the other one to have its base value of 100. Let's click play and see what these say. So this one to the right says 45 and this one says 100. So we've now successfully bound that number value to a variable on the item class. Excellent. So that's going to conclude this video. To recap, we added an integer variable here on the item class. It's an int32 called item count, which we initialized to 0 in the constructor. Then in pickup widget BP, we bound our number called item amount by creating a binding function here in Blueprints. And by the way, we can switch from the designer to the graph tab with this icon up here, and that will take us to not only the event graph, but also we have access to these binding functions and we can take a look at them and edit them. Here's the one here for the item name text, and here is the item amount function binding. Now in the next video, we're going to bind these stars here to an item rarity. We're going to give our item a rarity value that determines how many stars are visible on the widget. Okay, we'll see you in the next video.